Hello, you're watching Tech Now and I'm Selwyn Manning, and tonight we are joined by technology commentator Sarah Putt to discuss some of the big issues in tech this week, including what policies are getting the nod from the tech sector leaders. We're talking about the New Zealand elections there. Also, should Apple and Google get a 30% cut on app sales? Or are they ripping people off? And Facebook's photo platform Instagram, it turns 10. Congratulations to Instagram. So why does the social media giant plan to merge Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp's messenger systems? But first, here's an invitation to those of you who are joining us live. If you are joining us via Facebook, Twitter or YouTube, feel free to make comments. If you do, we'll be able to include those in the program. So let's cross to Sarah, who is waiting online to discuss these tech issues. Good evening, Sarah.
Good evening, how are you?
Very good. It's been a wee while.
It has, yes.
It has.
We've been very busy with this election recently.
Yes, election campaigns are well and truly underway in the two biggest countries on the world, the United States and New Zealand. I think it's Kazakhstan is also in the midst of some sort of challenging election as well. But anyway, back in New Zealand. So what is happening in the tech space relating to policy? There's some parties are a bit slow to roll it out, while others have got a bit of momentum, as I understand it.
Absolutely. So it's kind of interesting. Some parties came out of the gate, and then others, I'm not sure we're going to see any tech, not this late in the piece, but we've seen never. So one thing that we've seen come through was the National Party were quite strong a couple of weeks ago.
First off the block?
First off the block, I think it's fair to say. We actually thought that the Greens might have got ahead of them, but it turned out that it was a policy, but now they've got a new one, sort of a high-tech economy type policy, which is slightly different.
Can you just explain that difference, if you like?
Well, I think
so we're on the same page.
Yeah, sure. So with the green policy, it was very detailed, it was very aspirational, it had gone through their membership. And then last week they came out with a much shorter, snappier version, with just some really sort of headline points about what they're going to do.
And what are those points? And what are they going to do?
So they're going to establish a digital export office at NZ Trade Enterprise.
Yep.
They're going to support the digital inclusion plan that Internet New Zealand put up. Which I think we'd already signed up to.
Yeah.
And they're going to look to support a real sort of Kiwi-first, Kiwi-made approach to government procurement, which is a discussion that's gone on for many years, is whether or not in government they should be prioritising Kiwi procurement as a way of building the industry, or whether it should be a playing field for everybody.
So what you're talking about there sounds to me to be in the procurement area. If the government is coming out with, say, a new platform in a particular area, and you've spoken to this particular point in the past, is it more prudent and best for the country if they procure that system from New Zealand innovators rather than offshore? Is that correct?
Well, see, that is a very debatable point on every single platform, on every single different issue. And I think
but is that what the Greens are talking about there?
That's what they're talking about, yeah. But it's small. I mean, it's a line in a policy.
Okay.
It feels very much high level.
Yeah. So if we get back
you walk into a coalition discussion.
Just to tidy this up from my point of view, not from you, you're doing it really well. So if we just back it up, so relating to what they're talking about with for innovators, that sounds like what they're trying to capture here, yeah, and the other stuff outside the procurement area, if we're just backing up, and that kind of stuff is what is the best way of incubating good ideas and getting them basically up and running and going. Is that correct?
I think that's a fair summary, and I think it's also how can you have government work hand in hand with the private sector to sort of bring forward this innovation and these policies. What I like about the green policy is that they recognise the importance of the technology sector.
Okay.
That it isn't just about New Zealand Inc., being a better economy. It's also about bringing the whole of it up together, and that digital inclusion piece. To nationals, it's a little bit more of a shopping list about what they would do, and costed it. So that there's a budget next to it, which is quite good, actually.
Well, they're weak on the costings in this election campaign, thanks to their new. Thanks to the person who's representing their economic engine room being under the gun, shall we say, about kind of marrying up very well and syncing with his calculator on some of the big issues in the budget area. So, look, a bit of tongue-in-cheek there. But yes, I'd understand why they would have their costings next to it. It's about them saying, look, we have done our sums on this particular one and they have been checked. The other thing is, if you're looking at that, if they've got a list, are they indicating in that policy setting priorities, and that's a priority ladder? Because one of the big things I think that is lacking often is when parties of all types and colours are putting their policies to the public, they're putting them out there in the order of which they think are most popular, but it doesn't necessarily indicate where their policy priorities are. So they get into the negotiation with another party or something like that, and everyone's after a bottom line, and in some ways I believe that that's redundant in the MMP environment now, that if they are there with their priorities, we know what they're going to do. A little bit like what Helen Clark did in the 1999 election all those years ago, where she had a credit card kind of thing, and it had all of their priorities, remember? So that's why, sorry to harp on, but that's what's behind my questions relating to the National Party's order. Do you get a sense that that is in a priority order or a priority list?
Well, I get a sense that there's a few interesting things that have spoken to the technology sector and listened. When you look at the costings, there's a couple of big figures in there. One of them would be the $300 million Elevate Fund, and they're going to reorientate 2/3 of that to startups. Now, that is already there. It's in the budget, it's in the government's budget already, so it's just a matter of prioritising. The big figure is $1 billion to extend the UFB, the ultra-fast broadband, and the rural broadband initiative over 10 years.
Okay, so that needs fast tracking as a priority, because there's a lot of people, in the rural sectors that have been struggling to actually get a part of the action here, isn't it? Aren't they?
Well, I think what you're going to see is that I think governments in any stride are going to make that investment. That is so core to not just to exports and the industry, but healthcare, education. We saw that with the COVID. That network stood up, and New Zealanders felt pretty good that we were able to keep most services going, and people working from home pretty seamlessly from a coverage point of view.
Maybe from
I don't
coverage.
see that changing under any government.
And I saw some big numbers coming out of Chorus that was monitoring that throughout the country, on the fibre networks. Maybe there was a lot learned from the Rugby World Cup, when not just how to lose the Rugby World Cup, but also from the point of view of watching online and Zooming, and et cetera, et cetera. So certainly that's a point that I don't think I've seen a lot of people actually raise, is what you just have done there, that we actually stood up very well during lockdown.
Oh, it was big in my world.
Okay, well that's good. It shows you how estranged I am from the real tech world.
Well, that's the point, though, is that with technology sector, is that so often we don't get passed into the mainstream and talk about issues that are really important. I mean, I think of cybersecurity, and a lot of people sort of yawn and want to listen, eat, sleep. But in actual fact, we look at what happened with NZX last month. We talked about it on this show, and suddenly it comes to the forefront, gets into the public mind, and we realise just an incredibly important topic it is. And so it's one of those things in tech, unless you really focus on it, you can lose sight of its importance.
The other thing is getting back to policy and that kind of thing. I'll just do a little bit of a retrospective comparison, if you like. In the last election in New Zealand, 3-year cycle, 3-year term, which is being encouraged for everybody to start thinking about it, should it be a 4-year term, and I think that's a great debate to have. Anyway, 3 years ago in the election campaign, it seemed in the tech era it came down to two principal kind of ideas. There was the incumbent national-led government, which had been, it had been kind of encouraging innovations through what I would refer to as very high street outlets. That a lot of people that were not necessarily large companies or companies that had a very, very long proven record of tech proficiency. Those were the priorities on accessing government funding to initiate advancements in technology, and et cetera, that those perhaps that were the Steve Jobs of today that were sitting there in the garage of their parents' home, et cetera, were going to miss out on that kind of assistance. Then Labor on the other side was kind of saying, well, we don't what we prefer here is to see some immediate returns by way of tax certificates, so that there was money returning for R&D that was able to be identified that was spent on tech development, et cetera, for companies. And they were talking in the campaign sense about $100,000 cap on that. And I remember there was debate around it, and I certainly was having my say on different things as well, and saying I felt that was far too high, that the R&D component should be down around 50, and I think they settled on that number by memory. But those were the two things of what was 3 years ago. It seems now, if we look at the Greens policy and you look at what National Party is prioritising, if it is priority there, are starting to get some realness into the policy offerings, which seems to me to be a more healthy position of where we are now. It's not a battle of the titans on how you're actually going to distribute the funds. And of course, Labor actually didn't exclude innovation funds, from its thing over the last 3 years. It actually encouraged it and came to some sort of morph between it. So that's my take on it. And is there things to be corrected in that, Sarah? And do you get a sense of momentum into better times, more innovative, encouraging innovation in our current government's policy, in our political parties' current policy sets?
I think what you're saying is a couple of things. The first thing is, which I think is important, is that we're moving beyond this idea that tech is about telecommunications, that it's actually about a whole bunch of other stuff as well. And I think you're talking about a maturity in the sector as much as anything else, which I think is fantastic. And I think we have to see technology not just as an economic New Zealand Inc. type thing. It's also about, like I talked about before, and I think the Greens policy recognises that it's about digital inclusion. But I also, to be fair to the Nats, they think that too, because they've got 1,000 scholarships in topics.
Yes.
So there is that understanding. One of the things that I don't think we're quite there yet is to have a government that really gets tech beyond its economic advantage, that really wants to have discussions about AI, about where new technology is taking us, all that kind of thing. It's
for this 2020 decade, when we've got huge innovations, huge technological advantages overseas from the point of view of the embracing of AI in different ways. Machine learning is very, very, very well advanced in many kind of different areas. How does that affect perhaps the smaller, very intelligent approach to tech development and positioning New Zealand opportunities and innovation in that space? I know that, that discussion, for example, that Grant Robertson led in opposition some years ago now, about 4 years ago, about the future of work, it's almost like it's crying out for that to actually realign. I don't mean just Labor, I mean all parties, and certainly whatever party wins leading the government post this election. That seems to be crying out for it to be embraced, to be government-led with sector, to actually get some real advancements at a time when New Zealand needs to rethink its opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's very important. And I think the discussion that we have has to be about right across. It's not just about the people that are at the head of the line. It's about everybody. Because, we all know where the line for different reasons, But the other thing that I would say about technology is it's a recognition. So one of the National has is Minister of Technology. They want to bring in a new portfolio. And last election, we were talking about the Chief Technology Officer that would kind of like more of a civil service position.
And then politics got in the road.
Politics got in the road. It never came off. The things off the table. So a Minister of Technology might be an elegant solution to that. And as I was saying, and to various people, maybe just Nationals put it in their policy does that if another government gets in, they can't take that idea.
Yeah, I think so. We saw it in part way back when Helen Clark first became Prime Minister. So after 9 years of National, Helen Clark came in. There was a little bit of a swift new broom that was going through. And you saw a Minister of Communications, etc., who was Paul Swain. And that was in the days when Clear Communications were doing, cell phone. There was GSM networks and things like that, well before 3G. And so it had a big part, perhaps, in scoping out how New Zealand would position itself in the latter 2000s. And I think, Paul Swain might not be remembered by a lot of people, but he did a lot of really good work in that way. You saw Stephen Joyce, once again, when John Key's-led government was in evidence, Stephen Joyce taking the opportunity of the time and connecting New Zealand in a real sense from the point of view of fibre, and fostering innovation, engaging with the tech communities. He was not the Minister of Technology or anything like that, but in his business innovation portfolios, he really pulled into some things together. I couldn't agree more, Sarah, that irrespective of the colour of the next government, that this is a vital, considering also from the point of view of where New Zealand is positioned and requiring to be able to overcome the tyranny of distance, and technology is the way through that.
Can I just say one more thing? I talked about AI. I think up to the government, the current one, the algorithm.
Yep.
We had the police sign up to us, and that is what I'm talking about. Understanding technologies around AI and and find steps to ensure that there's oversight, that the treaty part of the whole discussion is sort of transparent about how these things are used. So sometimes they don't have to be in policy to actually become enacted. So I think that is something worth mentioning.
Oh, that's really good. Speaking of technologies, I apologise to people who may have sent in some comments to be dragged across and added into this. What we're doing at the moment is we're testing out. We're one of those many people who are testing out the Ecamm Live beta platform. So we've been using Ecamm Live for a wee while, and it's fantastic from the point of view of it's modular. You can plug on this, plug on that. Now, a big factor of this is being able to see comments coming through from social media, bringing those in, and then Sarah and I can speak to those points. Now, this is where the apology comes in. I've got a thing up in the beta that we're testing out, and it says there was an error loading the comments. So I'm just being quite open, and taking it on the chin. But we're testing a platform at the moment which has definitely got some legs. It's doing some really good stuff. So we better get on to this other point, and thank you for that. And just before we do, I should ask, do you get a sense that Labour is going to announce its tech policy soon?
Not really, no.
Well, Labour people out there, you should be,
I'd love to see one, but I'm not getting a sense that I'm going to see one soon. But I mean,
you can live in hope. So
there
you go.
Always.
You can't leave in politics. You can't leave vacuums, or someone occupies that vacuum, like in any other science. Anyway, our next point is, should Apple and Google be getting this 30% cut for app sales? Now, I saw this debated on Bloomberg about a month ago. And it was obviously a huge topic around the world. What's the take on this, Sarah?
Okay, so when you put a developer in an app on the App Store, either iOS or Android, Google or Apple, they take a 30% cut of it if it's a paid app. So they'll take 30%. So what happened is that a lot of developers are like, this isn't really fair. You're taking 30%, big chunk of it. But who's take on the big right? So what it is the maker of Fortnite, which is this massive online game. You get a sense of how big it is. We talked before about Chorus and its coverage. Every time they do an update on Fortnite, their traffic noticeably spikes. And they usually get that sort of now, but what they want to do is that they try to serve the App Store and their gamers pay directly. So Apple said, go away, take them out. And then they came back and they said that end users can't do that, so they've gone court.
Yep.
And Google stood up, we're going to stand by the 30% as well. What are you going to do? So it's gone to court, judge the preliminary hearing of
this is in the US, yeah? Court in the US.
Yeah, because although it's all US, it's going to affect New Zealand developers. It's going to, it's one of those examples where because all these companies are based in the US, it affects everybody else.
Yeah.
So they have court judge was kind of seems to come down on Apple's side. That Epic had been a little bit insinuous, but Epic has some good allies in place with people like Spotify, who also want to be able to challenging this censorship. So it'll be interesting to see where it to give you a sense of how it kind of clashes. It's going to be a $17.5 billion company. And they're going up against Apple, $2.3 trillion company.
Yeah.
So you don't.
Okay, so where's the equaliser on that? Have they got a good case against Google, which may equalise the actual money component of it?
Google and Apple. Well, Google and Apple, their part would say you wouldn't have a store for us, but you wouldn't be able to distribute it as widely as you can. And on top of that, when you look with regards to the Apple Store, we give consumers confidence that those apps have gone through a system, so that consumers aren't downloading the wrong thing, that there's a sense of security and all the rest. Because if anybody put an app through the App Store, it usually takes up to 2 days before it gets that approval.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen the pre-approval kind of things of even getting listed as an app developer. And it's comprehensive and it's very thorough and not just on financial or experiential kind of things. It's also elements of moralistic as well. So it's obviously got its value. And they're saying, they've created the platforms they respect, each other. Do you think that 30% clicking the ticket as it goes through, they're providing the storefront, if you like, et cetera, do you think that that's satisfactory?
Well, I mean, it's really hard to sort of make that call. To me, I think, well, it's a little bit of a shot, what they do is whether or not you're an ancient monopoly provider, and I think there's kind of move into those sorts of areas. And we know that Google and Apple are definitely listening to these conferences at the moment. They're investigating the really. Most of the ones that are consumer facing concerned about market power and that thing, and 30% entrenches these monopoly players. You might say that it's but then at the other end, you can see that they've got that point where they've created this platform by which people can create lots of wealth for themselves. And a lot of people have created businesses that never been able to go out on home stores.
But there's also, and this is a bit of a segue into our third point relating to Instagram's birthday, in a way. And this is it. That there's a sensitivity, particularly in the United States, of these tech giants becoming absolute giants, and absolutely soaking up huge unknown amounts, or not certainly qualitative amounts of money in this post-COVID lockdown period, or through the COVID lockdown period and into the post. So that sensitivity seems to be getting a lot of those tech giants, of which Google and Apple are among those top tier ones, but certainly Facebook, to prepare perhaps for a bit of a backlash. And this is where it connects, I think, Sarah, potentially to this birthday with Instagram. And what I'm getting at here, happy birthday to Instagram. And I enjoy Instagram, actually. It's probably the social media platform that I think is the best. Not because it engages so much, but the community around Instagram seems to be a much more enjoyable experience for the participant. So, and if that's a part of life, and enjoyment in life is something to be regarded, I kind of value Instagram very much. So I can see why it's a success. With the 10 years, the question here is if it's been so successful, and one of the things is its engagement and it has its own message system, why is Facebook considering merging the communications part, like Messenger on Facebook, Instagram's message system, and also WhatsApp? Why are they merging that? I put it to you a question here. Is it because they want to create one entity in the message system with 3 different platforms to slow down or stop being forced by regulators in the United States of dividing the company up, those 3, and selling them off? If they make those 3 companies interdependent on each other, then there's some sort of slowing. So I put it to you about what is the view from your view, and also what are you picking up from the tech world on that point?
Well, I think there is a lot in that, because if you can't structurally separate these things, then it's going to make it harder for for the regulators to come along and order that they do so. What's really interesting, Instagram's 10 years old. It was only 2 years old, and whilst it accumulated a lot of users, it wasn't necessarily one that you thought would be amazing, but it was sold for $1 billion to Facebook in 2012, and everyone was kind of like, well, that's a lot of money to pay for an app. But as we know now, a 2-year-old app, which didn't have any sort of marginally better or worse experience than anything else. But obviously Zuckerberg had seen the user, the trend going up, and he understood the power of it. Yeah. And then he obviously integrated it. Well, he kept it as part of Facebook, and then it also got WhatsApp as well. And
you could opt in to
and it made it easier to kind of you've moved one user over, and you really entrenched a monopoly is the argument. And it's certainly one through Congress at the moment. And on top of that, you talk about the user experience that you like on Instagram, but there's a whole bunch of social concerns at the moment about things like Instagram, the effect on young people, and the fact that they their mental well-being on that because of the way that they're always fantastic lifestyle.
Right. So Instagram is right in frame with that, because like many people, I think probably that would watch this program, I've watched the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, which faced primarily on Facebook. And Instagram didn't really get much attention in that area. Huge concerns relating to specifically what you're talking about there. So
addiction,
well-being. It's a must-see if people haven't seen that documentary, I think,
I think it's a very good one to see. It's on Netflix, and it just explains, it talks about it in a way, and it depicts in a way that you understand that saying, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And it basically shows a couple of things. Everything you do, every interaction you have on these platforms, in the middle is a monetization layer.
Yeah.
So what you're doing and who you're talking to is actually benefiting somebody else commercially.
And I think it really...
I'm not sure that's impacted in the same way.
Yeah, and I think it really laid bare how the algorithms do create the echo chamber. And all of that. And it made sense in so many different ways. So many tiers to that started to fall into place. And I thought it illustrated it so the entry points, didn't matter on anybody's understanding really at different levels of technology, their entry points to get understanding with that documentary. The dilemma element in the name I thought was very good too, because here we are. We both, I'm sure Sarah, you and I share the same concerns relating to what came through in the social dilemma documentaries relating to exploitation, the erosion of free thinking, etc., and lack of context in what was supposedly factually being put to people and is put to people, and the conditioning and packaging of all. There's so many tangents to it. But the dilemma element is, here we are, you and I, and we're beaming into Facebook, we're beaming into YouTube, we're beaming into Twitter. Twitter and Facebook particularly got a lot of attention in that documentary. That's where the dilemma comes in, and I think that's where the debate between what they should be doing, what they are doing, and how much of a commitment you actually make to the future or disengaging. And I know people who watching that documentary, they're out of it. They don't want a part of it. So it's a fascinating thing. Sorry, it's a little bit further away from the 10-year-old birthday of Instagram, but isn't it vital to see, as it's approaching its teenage years, some of the challenges that the success is actually experiencing?
Well, don't forget the other thing about Instagram is the influencer. we'd never really had one of those. That trend of marketing and PR that you have with influencers now.
No.
I mean, people have made huge amounts of money just by amassing huge amounts of followers.
Yeah.
And if you're in the marketing game, as I have been occasionally, it's quite a big part of it.
It is. Well, and just to finish off, perhaps, on my part, not yours, is my enjoyment of Instagram is obviously not checking out the latest fashions. I'm hardly a fashion magnet. But what I do enjoy is the journey that I've been going on with photography, reacquainting myself after 15 years of picking up a camera, and I'm putting those up. They're not perfect. They're rough around the edges, and seeing people that know what they're on about saying, oh, just do this, do that. It's really, really positive in a progressive sense. And also the sourdough experience. People, there's Gareth Ronalden down in the South Island, fantastic man, scientist and also journalist of note in the past, very much so, and pointing out, I think you cracked it with a sourdough photo I put up there. It's that kind of thing. I don't even bother putting them up on Facebook. I certainly wouldn't put those photographs up on Twitter. It's just
it's not the kind of thing. Space. Yeah.
So it's a wonderful thing if it's done right.
That's true, because I like to I like to grow herbs, and I like to put them up, and I love to watch all the medicinal herbs and things like that, and people creating these beautiful things that you see them in the middle of the day, and it does feel uplifting. It's true, but I feel like we are not of the generation that's been targeted in that way, and also that whole worrying rabbit hole that can go down. And Instagram it's not just about well-being for teenagers, but it's in that documentary, the conspiracy theories, and the making that's stolen by other countries to democratic processes.
Yeah.
And there's a huge issue that we all have to grapple with.
And they're real. They're real.
Absolutely. Propaganda is a very strong tool.
Yeah.
And it's particularly used by dictatorship to mess up democracy. Yeah. And we just know that really happens in countries. It's horrible to see.
Good on you, Sarah. You highlighted a really important stuff there on the back of a little subject that said about Instagram's 10 years in existence. So thanks again for joining me on Tech Now on Evening Report. It's just fantastic, and all the best, Sarah, and I hope we get to see you again in a couple of weeks.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All good, always good. Okay, take care, and thank you people for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion on Tech Now of what's been happening out there. Take care, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.